not be slain in the house of the Lord. Why did not Jehoiakim want her slain right there where she stood? Why not kill her right there where she came into the temple? It was a holy place. It was a holy place. He said, get her out of here. Kill her out of there. Why? Not in this holy place. And it was a place of rejoicing and happiness. Now, I want you to notice that right after this, in verse 17, Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people. They said, okay, everybody, now listen. Some have been serving Baal. The Lord's house has been broken down for a while. But he said, now make a decision. Be the Lord's people. And they did. They made this covenant. They made a promise. And all the people of the land went into the house of Baal and break it down. In verse 18, his altars and his images break they in pieces thoroughly, and slew Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest appointed officers over the house of the Lord. Joash had quite the beginning of his life. As we pick it up in chapter 12, it says, in the seventh year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign. And 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. And Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all his days, wherein Jehoiada the priest instructed him. But the high places were not taken away, and the people sacrificed and burnt incense in the high places. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated things that is brought into the house of the Lord, even the money of everyone that passeth the account, and the money that every man is set at, and all the money that cometh into any man's heart to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priest take it to them, and every man his acquaintance, and let them repair the breaches of the house. Wheresoever any breach shall be found. Now here the king says, listen, all the money that comes in, there was a tax that Moses had presented that everyone was supposed to pay to help keep the house of God in repair. He said, when that comes in, and any other money that somebody just wants to give, use that and repair the breaches of the Lord. Or I mean, in the house, in the temple that was in his house. Fix anything that's not right, anything that's broken down. Now look in verse 6 here. It's astonishing. But it was so that in the 23rd year of Jehoash, the 23rd year, he was 30 years old at this point, the priests had not repaired the breaches of the house. 23 years later, the place was still in disrepair. Something's wrong here. Something's wrong. In verse 7 it says, then King Joash called for Jehoiada the priest and the other priests, and said unto them, why repair ye not the breaches of the house? Now therefore receive no more money of your acquaintance, but deliver it for the breaches of the house. In verse 8, and the priests consented to receive no more money of the people, neither to repair the breaches of the house. Now that might sound a little confusing. It sounds like he doesn't care anymore. But you know what he's saying here? He says, listen, you guys quit touching the money. You're not allowed to touch the money anymore. Don't collect any more money from the people. And then we see here in verse 9, but Jehoiada the priest took a chest, bore a hole in the lid of it, and set it by the altar, by the right hand, that cometh in of the house of the Lord. And the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. So he brought this chest, closed it down, put a lock on it, no doubt, put a little hole in the top, and said, it's like a big piggy bank. Put the money in there, and don't let anybody else touch it. Okay, what was happening? These priests got this money in their hands. Instead of fixing the house of the Lord, they used it for themselves, didn't they? That must have been what was happening. Now there's a parallel passage here that I would like you to see that takes the story from this point and goes a little bit more detail. And don't lose your place here. We're going to come back to this point. So if you have something, stick it here by chapter 12, and then turn over to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles. Chapter 24. 2 Chronicles, chapter 24. Second Chronicles 24, we kind of pick it up in the same place. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 40 years. Tells us his mother's name. Verse 2, it says, Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. And Jehoiada took for him 2 wives, and he begat sons and daughters. And it came to pass after this that Joash was minded to repair the house of the Lord. And he gathered together the priests and the Levites and said, Go into the cities of Judah, and gather all the money of Israel to repair the house of your God from year to year, and see that you hasten the matter. Howbeit, the Levites hastened it not. The king was like, come on, let's get things right with God. Let's clean up this mess. Let's fix the house of the Lord. But the Levites weren't in a hurry. Here we see in verse 7, for the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, had broken up the house of God. They intentionally had gone in there and busted things up. So here we see in verse 8 that at the king's commandment they made a chest and set it without at the gate of the house of the Lord. Now before we saw that Jehoiakim took the chest. All right, and it looked like here Jehoiakim had been making all these decisions, but you know what? King Joash had said, hey, you know what, Jehoiakim, what we need to do is make a chest, lock it up, put a hole in the top, and Jehoiakim did it. All right, he did, and Joash had this in his heart to do this for the Lord. In verse 10, all the princes rejoiced and brought in and cast into the chest until they had made an end. Now it came to pass at what time the chest was brought into the king's office by the hand of the Levites, and when they saw that there was much money, the king's scribe and the high priest and the officer came and emptied the chest and took it and carried it to its place again. They took the empty chest and put it back in its place. Thus they did day by day, and they gathered money in abundance. They took this money and they gave it to the workers. You go back and read in Kings, it says they just gave it to the contractors. They said, here's these bags of money. They said, here, fix the house of God. Here, fix the house of God. It says that they didn't even keep track of it. You know why? Because they had honest contractors back then. The Bible said that they had a heart to fix the church of God up. Now, you don't do that with contractors these days. You just don't give them big bunches of money and don't keep track of it. All right? But back then, they were able to do that because they were honest, faithful men that really wanted to repair the church of God. Well, we see something kind of sad here. We see something kind of sad in verse 15. But Jehoiakim waxed old. Jehoiakim, who is he? Who's Jehoiakim? What? Who is he?
High priest.
Huh? Jehoiada. I'm sorry, Jehoiada. Who is he?
High priest.
He was the high priest, the head priest, and whose life had he protected?
Joash's.
Joash's. All right, well, he was a young boy, unable to protect himself. All right, he did what was right. Here we find Jehoiada waxed old, was full full of days when he died.